Hello, students. So let's divide rational numbers. Now, it says here that when you divide rational numbers, you follow the rules for signs as you use for dividing integers. So same sign, positive, different signs, negative. Again, if it's a positive divided by a positive, your answer will be a positive. If it's a negative divided by a negative, and your answer is also a positive. If you have a positive divided by a negative, you will have a negative answer. Or you have a negative divided by a positive, you will get a negative answer. So let's start with our first problem. So for our first problem, we have 1/3 divided by 2/5. If you have this setup, rewrite it using the division symbol. So we got 1/3 divided by 2/5. Now remember, when you divide fractions, it's the same thing as multiplying the number by its reciprocal. So that means we change, and we flip. That's why it works, because dividing again is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So we're gonna keep 1/3, change the division symbol into a multiplication symbol, and we need to flip 2/5 to 5/2 because the reciprocal of 2/5 is 5/2. Now we can multiply straight across. Now, but before anything else, can we cross simplify these? 1 and 2, is there a common factor? There's none. How about 3 and 5? Is there a common factor to simplify? None. So we can just multiply straight across. So we got 1 times 5 is 5 over 3 times 2 is 6. Is our answer positive or negative? Yes, it's a positive because we're dividing two positive numbers. So our answer is 5/6. Now, let's try number 2. What if for number 2, I have 10 divided by -3/4 equal to, now, remember, 10 is a whole number. That means we can write over 1 right here, because a whole number is an improper fraction with a denominator of 1. So if we do this, again, we multiply by its reciprocal, it's going to be 10/1 times -4/3. Now, can we simplify anything here? Nope, we can't. So we multiply straight across. It's going to be -40/3. Why negative? Because we're multiplying or dividing signs that are different. Now, let's change this into a mixed number. 3 can go into 40 how many times? Exactly. It goes to 40 13 times. And what's the leftover? Yep, and the remainder would be 1. Because 13 times 3 is 39 plus 1 is 40. So it should be equal. Now, don't forget the negative sign. Okay, so that is our answer for number 2. Let's move on to number 3. Okay, so let's do number 3. I have -2 and 2/3 divided by 1 and 5/6 plus 2. So we have these three values that we're going to be dividing and adding. So let's follow the order of operations. So we're going to do these two quantities first. The -2 and 2/3 divided by 1 and 5/6. Again, we need to change this into improper fraction. Okay, so this is how you do it. So 2 times 3 is 6 plus 2, and that's going to be -8/3. Divided by 6 times 1 is 6 plus 5, that gives you 11/6. I'm not going to touch plus 2 yet. I'm going to do this 2 first. Now, we're going to do multiplying by its reciprocal, the keep, change, flip. So we keep the number, and we've changed the division to a multiplication symbol. We change it into its reciprocal. So that's going to be 6/11. Okay, now let's cross simplify if we can. Look at the number to the top right, the 6, and the denominator opposite of it, which is 3. What's the common factor that we can divide into 6 and 3 evenly? And it is, absolutely, it's going to be 3. So we can divide both by 3. So that will give us 6 divided by 3 is 2. 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now, can you simplify 8 and 11? Can you cross simplify it? No, because there's no common factor for 8 and 11. Now we can just multiply straight across. So we got negative 8 times 2. That should give you a negative 16 over 1 times 11 is 11. Now I can bring this plus 2 next to my answer. So it's going to be plus 2 over 1. Why over 1? Because a whole number is an improper fraction with a denominator of 1. Okay, now when we're adding fractions, what do we need to consider? The denominator. They should have the same denominator. So with this, our common denominator is 11, right? Now, what did you multiply to 1 to get 11? We multiplied 1 by 11. Here you go. Times 11 times 11. So 2 times 11 gives you 22 and the plus symbol. There you go. Now, what did you multiply to 11 to get 11? 1, or stays the same. So 11 times 1 is 11. So negative 16 times 1 is still negative 16. Now, let's add. As you can see, the signs are different. This is a negative plus a positive. Now, remember our topic last week. When we're adding numbers with different signs, we subtract the magnitude and copy the sign of the bigger magnitude. So the signs are different, so let's subtract. What's 22 minus 16? So that's not it. So what's 22? Okay, there you go. So 22 minus 16. And that would be, oops, there we go. So the 2 becomes a 12, borrow from 2, that becomes a 1 because we can't subtract 6 from 2 earlier. Now 12 minus 6 is 6, 1 minus 1 is 0. So the answer is a 6 over 11. Now, is the sign positive or negative? So between these two numbers, 22 has a bigger magnitude, so it's a positive. So the answer is positive 6 over 11. Remember, don't get confused. Earlier, we were multiplying, dividing fractions, so the sign should be different signs equals negative. Now we're adding, so we're applying the rules for adding integers. Okay, don't forget that. Now let's move on to number 4. This is the problem for number 4. What if I have negative 1/3 over 1/4 plus 1 over 6? So let's reevaluate this. Now, if we have this type of setup, what do we need to do first? And you're right, we need to do the denominator first. Let's simplify this first. Okay, so what is 1/4 plus 1/6? Now the 1/3 at the top stays the same. So what's the common denominator of 4 and 6? If you skip count 4 and 6, you would get what? So 4, 8, 12, 6, 12. So the common denominator would be 12. So 12 would be the common denominator. What did you multiply to 6 to get 12? We multiplied by 2. What did you multiply to 4 to get 12? We multiplied by 3. So 1 times 3 is 3, plus 1 times 2 is 2. That should give us negative 1/3 over 5 over 12. Now I got the 5 by adding 3 and 2. Now I can rewrite this problem to make it easier for me to see or to look at. So that's going to be negative 1/3 divided by 5 over 12. And the next step is we keep, change, flip. We multiply by its reciprocal. So negative 3, oh no. Again, it's going to be negative 1 over 3 times 12 over 5. Let's cross simplify. Is there a number that we can divide into 12 and 3 evenly? Yep, there is. It's going to be divided by 3. So 3 divided by 3 will get you 1. 12 divided by 3 will give you 4. So now we have negative 1 times 4 is negative 4 because the signs are different. When we multiply or divide, if the signs are different, it's a negative. Now 1 times 5 is 5. So our final answer is negative 4/5. Let's move on to decimals. So let's do dividing decimals. Now remember, when you divide decimals, we're going to be using long division. So these are the parts of long division. So when you have a problem like this, the first number will be your dividend, is the number that we're dividing. The divisor is the second number. It's the number that we're dividing into the dividend. The quotient is the answer to the problem. So when you set it up, the dividend is inside, the divisor is outside, and whatever's the answers at the top will be your quotient. Okay? So when dividing decimals, step 1, make sure the divisor, make the divisor a whole number by moving the decimal point. Step 2, move the decimal point in the dividend the same number of places. Okay? So let's practice. Now remember, we're still going to apply the rules of integers when we multiply or divide numbers. If the signs are the same, it's going to be a positive. If the signs are different, it's going to be a negative. So let's try number 1. So for number 1, I have negative 0.24 or negative 24 hundredths divided by 0.6 or 6 tenths. If we label this is your dividend, and this is your divisor. All right, so let's do our long division. Now, the dividend's inside, that's going to be 0.24, and the divisor's outside, which is 0.6. Now, I know there's a negative, but I'm not going to use that. I know that if I'm dividing two numbers with different signs, the answer is a negative. So I'm going to write the negative first on my answer so I won't forget it. Okay? Now it says I need to make sure that my divisor is a whole number. So I need to move this decimal point one space to the right, one place to the right. So it's going to be a 6. So if I move the decimal point 1 units to the right, that means I need to move this decimal point in the dividend 1 unit to the right. So it's going to be 2.4. Also, we need to line up the decimal as well. So as you can see, I've lined up the decimals. All right, so don't forget that. Now let's do our long division. How many times can 6 go into 2? 0. So that's going to be a 0. So 0 times 6 is 0. Subtract that. It's going to be 2. Bring down the 4. Now, how many times can 6 go into 24? And we know 6 times 4 is 24, so 4 times. So 4 times 6 is 24. Subtract that, that's a 0. So our answer is going back to the top. Our answer is negative 0.4. Easy, right? Now, let's try to do number 2. For number 2, let's try this example. We have 5.4 divided by negative 36. Remember our dividend and remember our divisor. Dividend, divisor. So let's do it. So we got 5.4 divided by negative 36. But I'm going to put the negative on my answer because I'm dividing by a positive and a negative, different sign. So I know this would be my answer. So let's check that out. Now line up the decimal as well. Do not forget that. Let me highlight that for you so you won't forget. There you go. Now, how many times can 36 go into 5? 0. Good. 0 times 36 is 0. Subtract that. 5 minus 0 is 0. Bring down the 4. Now, how many times can 36 go into 54? 36 goes into 54 one time. 1 times 36 is 36. If you subtract that, you're going to get, this is 14 because you can't subtract 6 from 4, so you borrow from 5. 5 becomes a 4. 14 minus 6, that's going to be 8. 4 minus 3, that's going to be 1. Now we need to add another 0, then bring the 0 down. So that's going to be 180. Now, how many times can 36 go to 180? Now, in here, it's advisable that you need to estimate. Now, 36 is close to 40, or it could be close to 35, so you can skip count. How many 35s or how many 40s can fit into 180? So at first, you can try, you know what, let me try times 4. So you say 36 times 4. That's going to be 24. 4 times 3 is 12, 15, 154. Now, let's try another one. How about 36 times 5? So 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18, or 180. So I'm going to use the value of 5. So 36 going to 180, 5. 5 times 36 is 180. Subtract that, that's a 0. So our answer is this right here at the top, 0.1500s. But remember, it should be a negative. So our answer is negative 0.15 or negative 1500s. So this is our answer. So try to review that if you need to. Make sure that you know your multiplication facts. It's going to be really helpful. Let's move on to number 3. Okay. So for number 3, let's try this out. We have negative 0.4 squared divided by 2. Now we have an exponent. What does an exponent tell us to do? Exactly. We need to multiply negative 4/10 twice. So negative 4/10 twice, so 0.4 times 0.4. And that gives us 4 times 4 is 16. The 0 doesn't really matter because 0 plus times 0 is 0. Now, if you want to, we can. So it's going to be 0 and 0 and 0. So you got 16, 1, and still a 0. Now, let's count how many decimal place values do we have, or decimal places. From here, we have 1 decimal place. And here we have another 1 decimal place. So we have a total of 2 decimal places. So why is this important? Because we need to bring this back into our answer. So 1, 2. So our answer is 0.16. So we are done with this one. A negative times a negative is a positive. That's why I just put a positive right here. Now we bring down then divided by 2. So if we bring that down, put it right here. Okay, so we got divided by 2. So once we have this, let's do our long division. We know we have 0.16 divided by 2. And we need to line up our decimals. Can 2 go into 0? No, not really. So we can do that. 0 times 2 is 0. Bring it down. Now, can 2 go into 1? No. That's a 0. 0 times 2 is 0. Now bring down the 6. That's going to be 16. 2 can go into 16 how many times? Exactly, 8 times. So 8 times 2 is 16. And that is a 0. So our final answer for this problem is 0.08. And it is a positive because our negative is being multiplied twice, and that becomes a positive. We're dividing by a positive, which is a 2 right here. That's why our answer is a positive 800s. Oops. Positive 800s. Okay, are you ready for the last example? All right, so let's try this out. Number 4. Oops. Number 4. So for our number 4, we have negative 4.5 divided by 0.25. Okay, again, this is our divisor, and dividend. Okay, so let's write it out. Divisor 4.5 and dividend 0.25. Now, I'm not going to write down the negative. I know a negative divided by a positive, my answer will be a negative. I'm going to put the negative at the top so I won't get confused. Now, what's the first step? We make sure that our divisor will be a whole number. So let's move the decimal point twice. Move to the right. 1, 2. 2 units to the right. So it becomes 25. And we also need to move this decimal point in the dividend 2 units to the right. The same place movement from our divisor. So we got 1 and 2. This will be where the decimal point is. So that means we're going to write a placeholder. So it's going to be 450. And this is where the decimal place is. Oops, that's a 0. Okay, now let's try this out. How many times can 25 can go into 4? None. Okay, 4, bring down 5. How many times can 25 go into 45? And we say 1, once. So 1 times 25 is 25. So subtract that, that's going to be a 10, that's going to be a 20. So bring down the 0, it's going to be 200. Now, how many times can 25 go into 200? Exactly, it's going to be 8. So we're going to move, I use 8. 8 times 25 is 200, and that's a 0. How do you know? Because you already know it's 25 plus 25 will give you 50. So how many 50s can fit into 100? 4. But in 50, there's 2 25s, so there's going to be 8 25s to fit into 200. So our answer is negative 18. Okay, hope that helps.